Well, we are very fortunate now to welcome a gentleman that has nearly 2 decades of experience in analyzing the games industry, currently serving as an analyst for Circana, providing detailed reports on consumer spending in the games industry. We welcome now Matt Piscatella. Hello, sir.
Oh wow! Hello, what's going on? It's great to be here. Thanks for the invite. It's gonna be fun to chat games.
I'm so stoked and appreciative of your time today. I'm thrilled to pick your brain because you see so many different metrics and types of data that you share with us, and I am fascinated to see each month. But I cannot say with confidence I understand all of it, and so you have, in my circles anyhow, made a name for yourself at breaking down just massive amounts of information for common consumers to understand. Yeah.
That's very cool. Yeah, that's the goal with the public facing stuff. When I was growing up, there was no information anywhere about how any of this stuff worked. And I know I sure would have liked to have heard or seen some of the stuff that I'm putting out. So hopefully it helps some folks, for better or worse sometimes. But yeah, so happy to get into it. Let's do it.
All right, man. Well, strap in. You're gonna run the gauntlet today. Uh, let's start on a broad base level here. Can you talk to me a bit about what it is you do in the day to day as a games analyst that we may not see on the forward facing side?
Yeah, I spend a lot of my time chatting with retailers and publishers and media and just trying to interpret what we're seeing in the data and talk about what that data is, right? But really the goal is to not just say like, hey, this number is this, but like what that means and what that means in terms of what to do next. So I spend a lot of my time just chatting about video games. So my inner 12-year-old's pretty happy. To do that, I'm deep into the data, both primary and secondary research, everything from, our point of sale reporting or like the numbers to all types of survey work and all other kinds of fun stuff we do to try to understand what the heck's going on because, wow, this market is weird and wacky sometimes.
It really is, and I feel like, and I know we said this just prior to recording, but it really feels like now more than ever, everything is disrupted from what my expectations would have been in the gaming industry. And so to kind of get our bearings here, you work for Circana, which was formerly the NPD or is related to the NPD numbers that we as gamers used to see on the front-facing side.
Right. So the NPD group, they would be the ones tracking what we call general merchandise, which would include things like fashion and video games and tires and all of that stuff. We merged with a company called IRI, which did the same thing for the grocery store and the drugstore, like measuring how many bananas sold. And then we merged. So now we can see all of what we call discretionary consumer spending. So like the decisions people have to make with their wallet. We track $3.3 trillion of that spending in the US in video games is about 58 billion of that. 58 billion is a much smaller number than 3.3 trillion. But what we get to do because we have such coverage is I can look at, hey, what's going on at the grocery store and how might that be impacting how many dollars are available for something like video games. And there's a lot more relationship there than I think some people think.
That has to mean that you all see obviously far more than video games, but also the trends of like how consumer spending is impacted by anything from something like the pandemic, of course, but to just general inflation or the devaluing value of the dollar. Yeah.
Yeah, or changes in pricing and inflation, particularly in areas like food, has been a really big deal for a few years now. Things about the macro environment, inventory levels, shipping containers, like all of that stuff that comes together to really that the consumer has to navigate and try to figure out what the heck to do with this happening in the world right now.
I think the most useful thing for me as someone who kind of exists in these social spaces and follows you is you give wonderful kind of mini takes as these numbers come out. And like I was obviously scrolling socials in preparation for this, and something in the May 21st, 22nd range, you were able to give quick takes on what April provided. And you were able to look at things that like what Oblivion Shadow Drop did for the market versus the year prior and how sub spending mattered. These takes that you give, how much do you get to think about them? How much do you line up the numbers before you get to make them? And like, I suppose there's no conceptual thought that I have like one main question, but these mini takes are so useful, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Well, that's really cool to hear. Yeah, so basically what I'll throw out publicly is the most condensed version of all the other work I've done to that point. So for example, I'll get the data for a month, basically a week before you see anything in the public sphere, right? So, I'm making sure things look right and everything where it should be and doing all of those checks and doing all the reporting and the projections and everything else you have to do for that. So when I finally take something to like a Blue Sky or a LinkedIn or something, it's, hey, this is exactly what you need to know. In my opinion, I could be wrong. You could think something different, but this is what the data is telling me in a really concise form. And I'm just, I want to help people try to understand, because when people don't understand what's going on, that's when there's frustration and people get angry and upset. And and I know I can't like share detailed data given this industry, but at least I hope to give people a little guidance. And sometimes people like it and sometimes they don't, but what are you going to do?
Fair. And I do have questions about that for sure. But do you get to see all that data and then, coalesce it down? But the data that you guys are bringing in at Circana, who is the information intended for and who is it provided by before it gets to someone like me on your Blue Sky?
All right, so big picture and just trying to make it as simple as possible. For physical data, we contract with all of the retailers. We cover about 98% of the physical retail market, and then we work with the first-party manufacturers to make sure we're projecting for the rest of it accurately. So we have those individual agreements with retailers. They send us raw data. All of our hundreds of people that work in the big data portion of what we do make sure that all of those individual SKUs get allocated and assigned to the right things, and it all rolls up the way it should. And then digitally, we do a few things. We have what we call a digital leader panel, which is an agreement with a group of publishers who agree to share their digital sales data so that they can also see digital sales data. And then we use a number of other resources from survey to panels to all types of things to try to estimate the parts of the market that we don't have that precise coverage. And then we aggregate, roll that up, weight it, do all of those things you have to do to make math work right, to come up with what we hope to be is the most accurate look at the market.
Gotcha. So that would imply that, as you talk to retailers, you're saying, hey, right now, PlayStation's selling X amount. And then you talk to PlayStation, we're seeing this. Does that track with you? Is that how it works?
Well, we're also telling the manufacturers what they're selling and what other folks are selling too. Gotcha. So for example, if we're talking about PlayStation sales with Sony, like Sony has internal reporting, of course they do, but we have the direct POS connection with the retailers. So then we do all of the work with the retail partners to come up with that most accurate look, and then we provide that to Sony and say, here's your share, your dollars, your units, and all this other fun stuff, and here's what everyone else is doing too. So the ultimate customer for us is the publisher or the retailer or whatever party, like financial firms that might be interested in that data.
Interesting. Something I see, or at least one of the most common things I see, at least in the gaming circles that I travel on socials, is that we often, as gamers, struggle to measure success. And sometimes I wonder if publishers and console manufacturers also do. But sometimes, or in years past, it was console sales, and that measured success in our industry. And then it transitioned for some, thinking about Xbox in this moment, but to monthly active users. And sometimes they discuss profit, sometimes they discuss revenues, net revenues. And you guys, when you kind of distribute this information, have you ever seen the information that you guys distribute cause a help or a hurt, a swing in any direction whenever you guys do report on stuff?
You mean in terms of like how it's perceived, or?
Yes, because we're very amateur sometimes in our takes. Recently, I know I asked you something on socials about Doom: The Dark Ages, because I saw in the weekly total active users for Xbox, Doom hit 5th, according to Circana reporting. And in my mind, I'm like, wait, it just came out. Did that make a splash? It didn't even chart for PlayStation. And I needed someone like you to temper what I was jumping to a conclusion on.
Okay, I get you. So yeah, everyone defines success a little differently these days, and that can even be among people who are just players. Like there are folks who still think that the number of units of hardware that sell is the most meaningful number. Other people would think it's monthly actives or whatever metric you think would best represent like the number.
Mm-hmm.
We try to give all of the numbers and then people can make up their own minds in terms of our client base. But yeah, when you're looking at so in particular, I share those engagement charts and the sales charts because they combine to tell a story. When you're looking at engagement and you're talking about the total number of players you have, at one point in history when, everything was physical and people were jumping from game to game to game, like the copies you'd sell and the players you'd have, they would actually line up much more closely than they do now.
Mm-hmm.
But because now the prevalence of the free-to-play behemoths, the Fortnites, the Minecrafts, the Roblox, the subscription services, which bring a much bigger potential audience to a game that joins that service with a much lower barrier to entry because people don't have to pay extra to try it out. Like all of those things combined to make those two charts pretty different. And just because a new game doesn't show up on a top 10 engagement chart doesn't really say anything about its sales, because getting on that chart is damn difficult when it's filled with Fortnites, Minecrafts, and Robloxes, right? So that's why we try to offer both and as many different takes I can offer, just so people can, understand a little bit more about what's going on.
Gotcha. And I have to think like these subscription services are a great disruptor to the commonly held, talking point that people said was success. But I also wonder, how reliable is something like a Steam chart or a Twitch viewer count or even an achievement tracker to measuring versus some of the reporting that you guys might do, if at all?
I mean, all of the services approach it a little bit differently. Most of them are API based, and it really depends on what you're pulling, what time frames you're looking at. The API stuff should basically tie out, but sometimes it doesn't. And we use a combination. We rely on what we call our player engagement tracker, which is a panel-based service. So we have basically, it's a huge friends list, a massive friends list, and we scan what people are doing every couple minutes, and then weight it, balance it, make sure all that stuff looks right, and then we can see what people were playing before they were playing what they're playing now, and how long they're playing, how many sessions, and all of that. So what we try to do is go a little bit deeper on the relationships between the games, whereas like the publicly available information you'll have on like a charts page is purely the numbers of that individual game. So it's a little bit of a different approach, and that's kind of the separation for us.
Have subscription services, online services, and cloud-based services made it more complex to figure out what success is for publishers?
Yeah, it certainly has, and there are still. I mean, how many years are we in now to Game Pass? Like, I don't know. It's been a while.
It's like 8, I think.
Yeah, people still have the debate within the industry about whether these services hurt or help. You'll have just as many developers and publishers talk about how they couldn't have made a game or they couldn't have succeeded like they did without the subscription service. As other folks will say, well, subscription services are why we're seeing declining game sales, or why, this particular game didn't do as well as it would have if the subscription services weren't around. So like that debate is still very hot. And I think ultimately where I've landed on it is that for some it helps and for some it hurts.
Mm-hmm.
And generally, like the better the game is, the more a subscription service would help, because that would help build virality. It would help build conversation and drive sales on other platforms. Like when Call of Duty hit Game Pass, we did obviously see a massive spike in engagement on Xbox,
Mm-hmm.
but sales on PlayStation 5 or PC were also extremely good. I think helped at least in part by the fact that there were so many people trying the game and they liked it when it came out. I don't know what people think about it now, but at the time they liked it. And that's true with something like even like a Sea of Thieves.
Mm-hmm.
That came out and did really well on other platforms. And alternatively, when a game comes out on a subscription service and isn't so warmly received, then that could also be viral in the other direction, where people go, oh gosh, like all these people are trying and they think it stinks. I don't want nothing to do with it. And they won't even try the game, right? So I think it's a little bit of opinions are all over the board and the results are all over the board. And I still don't think we have a conclusive answer on whether these things are good or bad to the overall economy, although people certainly have their very strong takes on that matter.
Yes, they really, really do. And it's funny, for every Helldivers situation that was very successful, Palworld successful at launching in and disrupting kind of that live service grouping, as it were, being in a subscription service also. Then you have something like Suicide Squad that might have struggled. See, I got you on that one. Suicide Squad will get you, it couldn't win. It didn't matter where it went. And so that seems to be a difficult thing to track also.
It is. I mean, eventually, though, when it did come to a subscription service, it actually didn't do too bad because people were actually able to try it out with very little risk, which, I mean, if you want to talk about like the big challenge of the industry right now, is that the alternative to any game you might want to sell someone is Fortnite, which is a damn good game on its own. So how do you sell someone a $70 or now $80 game if the alternative is already on their system? But that's a whole nother part of the conversation. And for multiplayer games like Suicide Squad in particular, trying to sell a premium version of that at launch in a multiplayer environment, which requires a pretty massive player base to really gain traction. That's a difficult thing to do too in this particular market, as we're seeing the impact of from things like Concord on down. It's a tough market to try to sell a premium product to participate in.
I think the live service realm, the free-to-play realm, has made it more challenging for a number of game makers to get their content seen, because to your point, and I agree with you, Fortnite's fantastic. They innovate on a near like a monthly basis. It seems like there's a new mode or something touching on a new genre. And I have to think it's very difficult to launch a game to get eyeballs and have somebody spend that money to go in. And the biggest disruptors in that realm, in the live service realm, I've seen recently from like my armchair spot, is like Marvel Rivals stealing some Overwatch, and Helldivers 2 and Palworld. And those are the ones that I see. Maybe there's more, but then for all those, I see the Concords and the others that do struggle.
Yeah, so just a couple of quick stats. So if you look at Xbox or PlayStation, and you take just the top 10 live service games that month in terms of total active users, 70 to 80% of people that turn on their box in a month will play one or more of those games at least once. And those top 10 live service games alone will take just shy of 50% of all hours played by everyone on those platforms. So when you are trying to bring out a new game, half of the hours currently available in terms of gaming hours on a box are going to automatically be going to just the top 10 live service games. So you're fighting for a much smaller share of the pie than you would have been, say, 10 years ago when we didn't have these games in the market. So it's the big live service games. I mean, it's great if you have one, Trying to break into that is extremely high risk, but with also extremely high reward, which is why people keep trying for that. And for everyone else, you're pounding against the door trying to break in, but even trying to get people's attention when it's so easy to just hop on one of those games, do your dailies, hang out with your friends, it's brutal, especially for smaller games that don't have huge marketing budgets. And of course, everything around video games coverage right now is a mess. So just even trying to get the message that your game is out is more difficult than ever, let alone trying to break in with an audience that's so dedicated to a really small number of games that have been at the top of these engagement charts for going on 6 or 7 years. Like it's a very challenging environment for everyone, which is why you're seeing everything you're seeing.
Gotcha. That makes me wonder if the high risk, high reward approach is something, and I'm thinking about Sony because we mentioned Concord, and I feel like that's the biggest example of late. They were maybe fair games, maybe, but not quite the same thing. But trying to get into that live service, break that top 10, create the product that can get in there and compete with them. Is that why they had so many projects simultaneously in that direction? Was the plan always to pick the one that's got the best chance and then axe them off? Or is that me kind of revisionist history?
Tough for me to speculate on individual motivations, but I think ultimately it's the same principle that's been around gaming forever. It's just a little bit different, is throw a bunch of dice and hope one of them comes out craps, right? Like you want a bunch of bets and you're hoping that one of the bets hits. That's easier to do when the development budgets were 15 or 20 million instead of 150 to 200 million. Much easier to make the bets when the stakes weren't quite as high. But people are still making those bets because the size of the prize is so big. But the challenges to get into that group are also massive. And like the default would be, well, no, you need to make, smaller bets, medium-sized games, all of the conversation around Clair Obscura, which, I mean, not to take anything away from the success, it's been a great success. I mean, awesome job, but an extreme outlier, one of the 15,000 games that have come out that has been able to succeed, right? And the big publishers need to drive big returns, right? That's just unfortunately how the system works, and you can argue that the system's bad, and that this is why the publishers are struggling, and sure, I'm not going to argue against that, but it's a lot easier to say that just make 10 small bets and it'll be just as fine, when the same development resources are needed for the small bet as would be needed for the bigger bet with a higher potential return. So it's that balancing act of trying to figure out that risk reward and math, and figuring out the best way to allocate your resources. It's just like any other strategy game, but in the real kind of world.
So we've half answered the first part of this next question, but stick with me to get the logic here. So the question is there truth to the idea that games can get drowned out by one another? And the reason I ask is that if there is truth in it, why do we see companies do it? Because infamously, Titanfall 2 was nestled between Battlefield and Call of Duty. But then more recently, Xbox, like a month ago, allowed Oblivion to shadow drop in next to two major Game Pass releases of Expedition 33 and Doom: The Dark Ages. So that surprised me for a lot of reasons that they allowed that to happen. And I wonder, is there truth that games do drown out one another? And if so, why do companies allow it to happen if they control it?
I think that the risk or fear of that is a little overblown, particularly. So talk about Grand Theft Auto 6 for a second. And, it moved, and all of a sudden everyone was talking about, all these games are going to announce now because GTA 6 is out of the way, and everyone was scared of GTA 6. And sure, there might have been some folks that were trying to avoid the direct window, but I mean, really, if you're 3 weeks outside of that launch window, you're more than fine. We see games launch at the same time and both are successful. We see games launch on their own and are not successful. So I don't think there's really a direct correlation or a direct relationship that can be made with an open window means a greater chance for success. I think there's just too many other factors at play. Although, like, if you could have your way, of course you'd want a wide open window. But sometimes if there's another big game in your window, that's drawing attention from particularly the mass market player to the gaming space. And they might look at that big game and go, hey, look at this other game that just came out and check it out. So yeah, I think the relationships are less concrete than I think some folks might think they are. And I think that there's enough differentiation in the audience that the wants and needs of that audience can focus on more than one game at a time. But, you know, it depends.
You had a post on the 21st about Clair Obscur saying that it had an incredible or great US launch, and it got to 19th in April's monthly active users on Xbox, 21st on Steam via the Circana tracker. And then it, let's see, I'm reading my own notes here, placed among the top 35 sellers in April overall, top 25 on PlayStation, and it launched in April 24th. So it had a very short window to be that successful. That's got to be thrilling for that small team. If you're Doom the Dark Ages and you're hitting just 5th on Xbox or not quite getting into that top 15 on PlayStation, are you frustrated at that deal, or does it not work that way?
Tough for me to speculate because the individual goals for those teams are likely quite different. You can tell by just the public facing comments from the Clair team that they're very happy with how things have gone, as well as they should be. It's had a heck of a great launch, particularly for the type of game it is and the scope it is, right? It's hit massively well with the core enthusiast gaming audience. It still has some work to do to really reach more of that mass market gamer. But for that very dedicated enthusiast audience, like, people are all in on this, and that's outstanding. And I hope, you know, it continues for a long time and they build on that. Microsoft's ambitions with something like Doom the Dark Ages could be quite different in terms of trying to offer a very compelling total portfolio across a much wider spectrum. You know, I think they're just, with their approach, they're trying to make the funnel extremely big through all of their other efforts, and having a wide expanded portfolio helps them do that. And so I think perhaps, I don't know for sure, but my assumption would be that their vision goes out much farther than, say, the Clair team, who's going to be looking much more at the short term, because as a smaller studio, you have to, right, keep the lights on, kind of thing. So yeah, so I think it's I think everyone's going to be a little bit different in terms of what defines success for an individual project.
I wonder, is it a matter of like how long the tail is on that comment? Like, does Doom the Dark Ages have like a longer tail because it's, you know, nestled in there, or it's on Game Pass or whatnot, versus Clair, which makes the big splash? Is that something you guys get to see or not see?
Yeah, I mean, we have tracking that goes forever for both engagement and sales tracking. And generally for an RPG, the initial launch window is extremely big, and then it tails off pretty quickly, but then has a very steady but low sales rate and engagement rate for a long time. You know, a game like Doom, a little bit more mass market targeted, you know, the launch isn't quite as important as for an RPG, and it should have continued life because it's going to be on that service forever, theoretically. Whereas, you know, who knows what the agreement is with Expedition 33. So yeah, it's just every genre is going to be a little bit different too, in terms of how it might perform and what the expectations should be.
Something I noted in some of the Circana like reporting, you guys track a lot. It's physical sales, digital for full game, DLC, microtransactions, subscriptions across console, cloud, mobile, portable, PC, and VR. And I read that straight from your post because I was just saying so much. You have to pull that in from so many different sources.
Yeah.
And then you do these comparisons where you compare like year to date, like how does 2025 rank versus 2024, and that is just a lot to take in for you all to see, and then for a company to think, okay, are we being successful? Are companies successful if they're staying even, if they were making money last time, or is the goal? I mean, the goal is always to go up. Let me read. Is it like, what makes it a flop? What makes it not?
So, okay.
Lots to talk about there. Sorry.
You can have two games, right? You
Mhm.
can have two games and you can have similar budgets and similar time in development. And because of whether or not you have a partner in terms of for the IP you're using, or if you have certain distribution agreements in place, whatever, there could be two wildly different goals for that game. Just one example from my past life, Batman Arkham Asylum. We published that game at Warner Brothers. We had no expectations for it because the superhero genre at that time didn't really exist. No one was buying or playing superhero games. We had the budget for development was really conservative. We were just trying to put out a game with this IP, in conjunction with the folks at IDOS at the time. And it turns out it did great. Blew away all expectations. A couple years later, we have a game that follows that up. Same IP. The expectations had changed. The development budgets had changed. And all of a sudden, everything around what that game was supposed to be was different. And it was still a success, but not the, breakaway, unbelievable success of the first game because the expectations were lower. So really, yeah, it all depends. And the goal is always to get to growth, but sometimes when the slate's not there, or, you're coming off of a year where you had 3 big hits and now you might have one, you're going to make sure that, or you're going to try to make sure that your expectations are right-sized. And sometimes other factors come in that make you change those expectations, but that's a whole different story. That has nothing to do with the data. But yeah, there's no one way that any of this stuff is, in terms of goals or expectations, no one consistent way that everyone uses to get to that number. Gotcha.
Selfishly, I'm just going to plug here that Arkham is my favorite series of all time for all gaming, and I thank you for working on it.
I mean, cool. I got a Batman thing from DC back there when I worked on that stuff. So that was pretty fun. Anyways, so cool. I love Arkham too, and Mass Effect, which is back there, but
Yeah, it's dope. Very cool. I have seen, and I love this. This is where I know I'm part of the problem, and I'm okay with it to a point. Remasters and remakes they seem to be just a proven way for companies to be successful because they have an audience typically that's very excitable. They're a good bet for a publisher.
Oh yeah.
And I'm pro remake remaster, but I'm also pro new game. And I have to wonder, does the remaster culture we have de-incentivize companies from creating new IPs or new genres and such?
Not necessarily. And of course, I'm speaking generally, and of course things can change from publisher to publisher, but the folks who focus on the remasters and remakes are generally those people who do that as a specialty. There are teams out there that do a fantastic job of that specific thing, and they're not as much, I'm sure they could make a new game, but what they really specialize in is doing that type of work. Whereas other teams are much better at doing new development. And sometimes when you're building out your long-range plan, you look at what resources are available and how best to allocate projects to those resources. So sometimes it's more, hey, we have these resources available. What's the best fit for these teams? More than it is oh, well, this remaster did pretty well, so let's figure out what other remasters we can make. Although that does happen too, but generally it's resource allocation. But yeah, when you look at the remasters and remakes, they're a pretty safe bet. Not all of them do what Oblivion did. Sure. Nowhere close, but they're consistent for moderate return on a moderate investment with a pretty high likelihood of success. So from that aspect, they're a safe bet, but they're generally not going to provide you the type of return that a big hit new game could. But then again, trying to bring out a big hit new game is very difficult. And if people could do it regularly, they would. So yeah, it's another one of those balancing of the portfolio type things that you're doing in your long range planning.
Gotcha. The shifting gears. I want to shift gears for a moment because console sales to me are very fascinating, because my understanding from my arm, just like sitting back and reading what I read, is that the console sales have been stagnant for a decade. But I feel like gaming has grown.
Oh yeah.
In a number of ways. Would you, from your position, do you see the same thing?
Oh yeah, console hardware sales peaked in 2008. We've never approached the 2008 numbers, which of course was the height of the Wii craze, motion control, the Xbox 360 Connect, and everything else going on, Guitar Hero, Rock Band at the time. So like that was like peak console hardware. We had another, then we dipped into 2013, which of course that was when people were saying, oh, this is the last console generation. Consoles are dead. Everyone's going to be playing games on their mobile devices and not use their consoles anymore. Of course, that didn't happen, but sales have been flat. Then we had the bump from the pandemic, but then, now we've returned back to the pre-pandemic baseline. They're consistent. Like we sell in terms of consumer spending, pretty much the same dollars on hardware that we did in like 2017. It's basically the same. So it's a mature market. And as you've noticed, there are fewer hardware platforms out there in terms of console platforms. The market's consolidated a bit, but it's just the thing with gaming is it had been a growth market for decades leading into the pandemic. And then all of a sudden in the pandemic, we had everyone playing all the games they wanted to as much as they wanted to. And now, we've realized where the ceiling is for that. And we've gone from a growth market to a mature market, basically overnight through the pandemic. And we're still kind of experiencing the growing pains of a change in mindset that needs to come along with that. But yeah, it has gotten bigger, but now it's more of a share game in terms of where people are playing and spending.
Does that, with the becoming a mature market, that is the pain of seeing studios close and the contractors, like studios just being axed? It feels like we saw so many job losses. Is that what you're referring to when you say that?
No, just in terms of total consumer spending or how many dollars are available for the market, right? So, but to extend to what you're talking about, we also have a situation now where we have the big live service games. We have the democratization, basically, of video game making, where now anyone can publish anything from their bedroom if they wanted to. We have exponential increase in the number of games available, whether they're, good games or, student projects, which are also can be good, but are, much smaller in scope, or pure slop that's been hitting some of these platforms over the last couple of years. And we've just had this exponential growth in the number of games available, but the number of players has not grown, nor has really the number of dollars available, at least since the pandemic. So, we have a lot more people fighting for the same pool of available players and dollars. And we have the big live service games in the mix it's making it all very difficult.
It feels like it takes a lot more for a studio to stay afloat sometimes, just based on that.
The risk of doing one thing wrong and then all of a sudden being gone is real. There's no room for error anymore. As sad as that is to say, there just really is no room.
If there's no room for error and the growth is flatlining, if that's what the mature market is telling us, does that de-incentivize people from getting into the gaming industry, and would that cause a contraction industry wide?
Well, one of the challenges we've had over the last few years is generating outside investment into gaming development. That's been one of the, especially for smaller developers and smaller teams, is, pandemic era, everyone wanted to invest in gaming. Now everyone's investing in other areas like AI for who knows what reason, because that gaming market isn't the big growth market it had been. So yeah, that's been a huge challenge, is just generating investment, trying to find people to fund making new games, and people are doing everything they can in order to make sure their game even comes out.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. I see in the, I don't even know if console space is the right word, but I'll use it for the moment. We have things like the Steam Deck, the ROG Ally, the G Cloud that all offer kind of a mobile-esque storefront, but it's not quite the same as your cell phone, of course. But then we're on the eve of Switch 2 arriving to theoretically inject some life into the console market. Do you anticipate console sales kicking up and going up, or kicking up and then flatlining back down again with a Switch 2?
So my expectation is the Switch 2 will be the biggest console launch in history, because they'll have the units available to sell, which is always the limiting factor in a console launch. The thing is that a big console launch does not correlate to the biggest lifetime sales. In fact, if you look at individual platforms, some of the best-selling platforms at launch ended up not being very good sellers in the long term comparatively. But my expectation is it'll have the biggest launch in history. But the question is what happens in the holiday. And we still have both PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series, which are on the back half of their sales cycle, which means we're in the natural decline phase in the console cycle for them. So that growth we're going to see from Switch 2 is probably not going to be enough to offset the declines we'll see on like PlayStation and Xbox. So I think it's going to, like, the hardware numbers are going to improve. We're not going to see the double-digit percentage declines like we have been seeing for some time now. But I still think we're going to be seeing some declines as we move into the holiday, but we're going to see. But yeah, it's going to be better. It would have been better if it launched last year and help buoy the overall market. But it is what it is.
I wonder how much the movement of Grand Theft Auto 6 out of this year will put pressure on Switch 2 or anything else to kick those numbers up. Because I was thinking, in my mind, Switch 2 and Grand Theft Auto would both boost the industry, give it a shot in the arm. That's not likely to happen in the same way, you'd think?
Yeah, I had mid-single digit growth coming into the year. Now I have a mid-single digit decline because of the push of GTA 6, but also just the chaotic market environment, and particularly the tariff situation, which, I mean, who knows what's happened in the last 42 minutes with the tariff situation. Anything could have happened. But because of those factors, and because of what we're seeing in categories like food and everything else, with prices going up and more dollars being allocated to those everyday spending categories, it's a more pessimistic outlook today for the market in 25 than I had coming into the year. That's for sure.
If it's more pessimistic now on your end, and then on the consumer side, I see the PlayStation 5 that I bought is more, at launch, is more expensive than now to purchase than it was when I bought it. That to me is an alarm bell, and I have to wonder, does the console market just feel too dangerous to survive in? And in my mind, I'm thinking about Xbox, who is seemingly exiting or making themselves available in other places because of the console market danger. Is the console market too dangerous to survive in when you have storefronts available via other things, or no?
No. So people are always going to want a shiny box to play games on their shiny new screens. The question is, especially this year, is we have so many other things happening and so much other noise and distraction happening in terms of, the economic climate, that I don't know what you're going to be able to take from this year and apply it to a long-term trend. Hopefully, hopefully things settle down one way or another. But right now there's so much uncertainty that I would hesitate to try to make any long-range projections based on kind of the turmoil we're seeing right now. But, I could be wrong.
Gotcha.
I think it's going to be I think this market, like a console market, is going to be fine, but it's going to evolve. Players want flexibility. They want to be able to play what they want, where they want, with whom they want. And the console is going to have to adapt to that consumer demand. And I think for the most part it is.
Which of the big three, PlayStation, Nintendo, and Xbox, seem most poised to be successful on that front? I mean, on paper, maybe Xbox, but I also cover Xbox, and I realize there's an inherent bias in me asking that. But they're also incentivized perhaps to change because they were so far behind in sales. So Is that the case? No.
So everyone's doing something a little bit different now, which is actually kind of exciting. Nintendo is, of course, the hybrid device. Like they've already kind of built in that flexibility, and they had the best selling hardware in the US all time, having surpassed PlayStation 2 in the US last year. Of course, it trails on a worldwide basis. Microsoft is doing something completely different. They're saying that, the box is fine, but the box is not everything we want to do. And we want to make sure that anything with a screen can play Xbox content. And we want people anywhere they are to play Xbox content, which is also a really great approach. And then you have Sony, who's like, hey, our approach right now is working extremely well. We have other things like the portal or the cloud service or all these other things ready to go if and when our market starts moving that direction. So I think everyone's pretty well positioned for that, but in a different way and with a different approach. And I don't see any one of them being particularly far out ahead, but of course I would say that because they're all clients and I want them to like me and not get angry phone calls. But in reality, like I think each one has a set of assumptions on where this market's going to go, and they're trying to adapt their strategy to that. And one of them is going to be more right than the other, and I couldn't tell you right now who that would be.
Is it possible that all three are successful and happy, or does one have to be winning to be happy?
I think that mindset is more in the fan base and always kind of has been than it is at the companies. Like, of course, folks are competitive and they would prefer that their market share goes up because usually a bonus is tied to that. And who doesn't want a bigger bonus? But ultimately, like, I mean, in my experience, the people that are at PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo, they like video games. And they want the video game environment to succeed, be healthy, and thrive. And I've never heard anyone at any of the companies say anything disparaging ever about another one of the boxes. Like, if anything, it's like, oh, I played that game, that was really great, or something like that. But never like, oh, our share went down 3 points. What the heck's going on? I've never heard that, but who knows? Maybe there's somebody that's like that, but I haven't heard it.
Sure. I'm glad to hear that that's more of a fan thing, because as I get older, I'm like, how silly was I in participating in that conversation 15 years ago, 10 years ago? Whereas now I'm just like, I like the brand. Let me play the games. I just want to play the games,
Yeah, I mean, people are passionate about the things they love, and they don't want the things they love to go away. So I kind of get it. But yeah, yeah. I'm kind of glad. Yeah. I'm kind of glad the console wars mentality is lessening, although it's not completely gone yet. It's nowhere near as prevalent as it used to be.
So let me ask you this: as we start to wind down, I have two general questions that might pillar, but we'll see. My first question is, what are you looking forward to with Summer Game Fest? What are you looking forward to as far as like getting to see stuff of any kind? I'm sure you get to know some things, not others, but the reception, does an event like that impact what you do on a day-to-day? And then what do you look forward to personally?
I mean, that'll always feed inputs for the outlook, the expectations, when we should start seeing some movement in terms of sales and all of that stuff. So yeah, I mean, that definitely has an impact. What I'm always looking forward to is the stuff that I didn't know about going in. And it's not the big games everyone kind of knows about. It's the game that's like, oh, okay, hey, I'm going to keep my eye on that one. That could be something, I'll watch the purchase intent or whatever. And this one, I'm actually presenting at the business show at SGF this year. So I'm looking forward to doing that. It's the first time they're having like a business themed event at the SGF. So really looking forward to seeing, those folks talk about what they're seeing in terms of the market. But yeah, like I'm just interested to see the showcases. It's always fun when that enthusiasm's there. I'm hoping that we see something new, unique, different, that can, do things more than just, shooting people, extraction shooters, and oh God, just no more extraction shooters is what I'm really hoping for. I don't want any more to stop with the extraction shooters, but I don't think we're going to stop quite yet.
No, we got to see Marathon, see how that turns
There's
out.
a lot more than that.
Oh
There's a
man.
lot of extractions. I don't know why. It's not like these things are like massively successful. Sure, they have an audience, but my goodness, like I think developers love extraction shooters more than anyone else. So I think they just want
Really?
to keep making them. I don't know. Anyways.
All right. That's See, that's just fun for me to hear because I think the same thing, and so I'm a little reassured. And if I see you at SGF, expect a handshake for sure.
Oh, right on.
Um, my other question for you is it's so generic, but I think so relevant. What's the biggest misconception that you see people have in social spaces or whatnot about what it is you do?
I don't know if there's any one that really jumps to mind. I think sometimes people think that I just have an Excel sheet open somewhere and I'm just kind of doing things. And when in fact, there's a team of literally thousands that are working on all of this data to make it work. So I think sometimes maybe it's because I'm approachable or something, but people don't understand just the amount of investment that goes into trying to do this kind of stuff that we do, and the size and scale of the team. But really, like, I don't really see anything like that. I see, thankfully, most of the people I talk to, or 99% of the people I talk to, are just curious, want to understand more, want to share a perspective. And a lot of the time I learn as much as I try to help other people out just in terms of what people are thinking. So like it's a give and take, which is what I really like, both in places like Blue Sky, but also in places like the install base forums, which are like the sickos, like the real sales sickos are on there and chatting with those folks. Like sometimes they're telling me things about the data that they shouldn't even know. But somehow they've cobbled it together through like public facing statements. Like we think it's about this. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to comment on that, but that's not too bad. That type of thing. So, but no, that's the goal, is just kind of like learn as much as I give. So
That's the best, and I'm grateful for it. Matt, I've taken 52 minutes of your time, and I just want to thank you for taking the time on a Friday. Please let people know where they could find you on socials, what they could look forward to if they're attending SGF or if they're going to get to see any of this stuff. Let people know where they can find you.
well, yeah, I'm on the Blue Sky, but really don't be on social media. Just get off social media. You don't need it. You don't need it. But if you're going to be there, follow people that make you feel joy, not people that make you mad. Don't do it. It's not worth it. But anyways, yeah, I'm on Blue Sky, and on the hell site known as LinkedIn, because I have to be businessy and all that. But yeah, and then at SGF, I'll be at the business show, which I guess is an invite only thing for businessy type. So if you're a businessy type, check it out, and I'll see you there. If not, hopefully I'll see some folks walking around LA live.
Yeah, that should be a good time. I'm very excited to see everything that comes from LA Live. That's a week from today. We'll be landing. No, wait, today's Friday. I'll be there. It'll be a week from today. We'll know. We'll see a lot of stuff. Yeah. Oof. Yikes. All right.
Safe travels and have a great time if I don't see you.
Likewise. Stick around after this little exit in video here. Thank you to everybody who checked out this video, whether you were with us live in this conversation or you checked it out on VOD. We appreciate you. To Matt's point, follow people that make you happy, support people that make the content you enjoy. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Take care.